Well, it's Saturday, and we're doing a versus. So the reason why is because with everything that has gone down lately, you were a little bit under the weather for a bit, and we've had a lot
I'm
of
still trying to get over it.
yeah, no lie. We have a lot of tremendously cold weather, as I've been complaining about in the videos you guys have already watched. So, needless to say, last week's verses didn't really go off like it should have at all. So, that's the reason why we're throwing out two this week, because this is the end of Oscar themed verses. And then after next week, or after tomorrow in this case, we go right into love theme for February. Quite an interesting difference between the next three verses. This one, tomorrow's, and the first one of love theme. So, three completely different movies, combinations of movies. So, this is going to be an interesting battle here. I'll throw this out here. I have seen Streetcar before. I have. I've never seen On the Waterfront, but as AJ has informed me, these are the quintessential Marlon Brando performances. Like,
I mean, people will argue The Godfather, but
without going into Godfather territory, don't worry, we'll do that eventually. But spoiler alert. But the thing is, these are two very iconic performances, and we're going to throw them out here. This is going to be our battle for Saturday for versus. It's A Streetcar Named Desire taking on the Waterfront. AJ, take it away.
Well, obviously, the movies, as far as their plot and genre, have nothing in common.
Nope.
But basically, the point is to pit the quintessential Brando performances against each other. On top of the fact, if you want to throw in, more similarities, Elia Kazan is the director for both of them, and Carl Malden has a major supporting part in both of them. So they have more in common than you would think. They pretty much have a lot in common except their stories.
Okay.
And they both got a shit load of acting nominations, which I will go into now. I guess I'll start with Streetcar. Before I go into the movie itself, once again, this was a very weird Oscar outcome, because 1951 was so weirdly split up. For starters, Streetcar was nominated for picture, director, Brando for actor, screenplay, cinematography, costumes, sound, and score. And it's worth noting that the cinematography and costumes and all that back then were split up black and white and color in their Oscar categories.
Nice.
And it won Oscars for Vivian Leigh won for actress, Kim Under won supporting actress, Carl Malden won supporting actor, and it won art direction for a black and white movie. You'll notice normally movies tend to dominate their Oscar year.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing dominated 1951. Streetcar took 3 of the 4 acting wins. A Place in the Sun won Best Director, and American in Paris won Best Picture.
Interesting.
That had to have been a very interesting night for everyone involved. Not to mention that this is considered one of the quintessential Brando performances, and he's the only person in the movie that didn't win. Bogart won for The African Queen that year, which I brought up in the Treasure Sierra Madre versus, so...
And we'll talk more about Bogey next month.
So, that was fucking weird.
Yep.
The 1951 Oscars outcome was.
Indeed.
I think this and Network are the only movies to get 3 out of 4. Nobody's done the 4. Maybe some David O. Russell movie 10 years from now will do it, but
yes.
Nobody's done it yet. So, basically the story is, if you've seen Blue Jasmine,
I knew you were going to go there.
this story will sound familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have Blanche Dubois, who is this, for lack of a better analysis, completely off her rocker woman, who's coming to stay with her sister, who is married to Stanley Kowalski, who is this basically brute of a person that's always drunk and basically feels he can bully his way into anything. Well, And supposedly, Blanche has gone completely broke, more or less. Like, they've lost their big estate and all that. But trouble ensues when Stanley gets paranoid that when he sees that Blanche still has like pearls and furs and everything, and is under the impression that Blanche might be holding out on them and just freeloading. But then the plot really starts to actually go into a place where, not to mention, Blanche is still reeling. The reason she's kind of not all there is she's still reeling from the suicide of her husband. Woody Allen, you plagiarizing fuck.
Good God. I completely forgot how much.
So, but while she's reeling, she decides that she's going to try to find love again with Peter Sarsgaard. I mean, Carl Malden. Carl Malden is a friend of Stanley's, who the four of them get together and play poker and make a shitload of noise, and basically are men. They get together and watch, manly movies. I almost said something there I probably shouldn't have. So, and then that's basically it. We just kind of watch these characters go through the situation, and the movie. It's clear how much inspiration it's caused for Woody Allen, because it's just these characters go through this story, and there's no really big. I mean, there are big moments, and there's big but there's not really a big story peak. It just kind of is what it is, and the characters do what they do, and then the story comes to a place where it can end, and that's pretty much what it is. Which is, the most you can expect out of a movie like this. It's obviously based on an extremely, no matter how many extremes I put it, this is still an understatement, famous play.
Yes.
And I think this is where Brando started, that he was doing it on stage, and then this was his first big movie. He had one movie before this, but I think it was a small part.
Mm-hmm.
But this was his first,
breakout performance.
Yeah. Which was really interesting to bring him in, because one of the big acclaimed things about this movie is the big difference between Brando and Vivien Leigh. With the way they're advertised and the way the poster looks, you'd almost think it was a love story about them, but the closest they get to a love story is when Stanley rapes her at the end. But besides that, you have two different acting styles going on, and this was unheard of back then, because you have Brando, who's doing this new method, natural thing, and you have Vivien Leigh, who's doing the dictionary definition of theatrical. She literally, it's almost like you were filming somebody that was on the stage. Where you have to do that, can you hear me in the back voice? And everything is just really, really theatrical. But the thing is the way she is and the way he is and the way their performances contrast is also perfect because of their characters. Because their characters are coming from totally different places, like the acting styles, and it just adds to it more.
Okay.
And then you have obviously Carl Malden and Kim Hunter also won Oscars, but they're kind of, it's a lot like watching George Segal and Sandy Dennis in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. You got the two people who get to really shine, and the two people who are just kind of there to react to people shining. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Now you have the really famous scenes. You have, I'd like to point this out real quick before I go into this. I really don't blame you at all, because I was exactly the same way. Before I actually saw the movie, I thought I think it's supposed to be taken both ways. I'm almost positive it's supposed to be taken both ways. But when people see the title, they automatically assume it's just a metaphor. But Blanche actually comes into town on a streetcar named Desire. Of course you can take it for both meanings. I'm sure you can take it as a metaphor too.
Same with Blue Jasmine.
Yeah, and you have the word Jasmine is actually said in this movie too. I could seriously see Woody Allen just going, I have my title now.
Wow.
You have okay, where was I going now?
Woody Allen's going to sue us.
Oh yes, somebody should be suing Woody Allen. What is he doing? you have your really famous scene, obviously, that's rather early in the movie, where the poker game is going on, and Blanche keeps turning on the radio. And for some reason, this drives Stanley up the fucking wall. So, finally, and he's been drinking, so he throws a fit, he throws the radio out the window, he's throwing a hissy fit, he's in a drunken rage. The guys have to drag him out of the room and put him under the shower, and they go upstairs to the neighbor, which is basically their, like, refuge when Stanley's, you know, out of control. And Stanley composes himself as much as he can, and he calls upstairs because he wants to see Stella, but the neighbor won't let her come down. So Stanley takes it upon himself to go outside and call for her, and I'm sure you've heard every possible reference to this scene you can possibly hear.
It's in the Great Movie Ride, actually.
So much so, I don't even have to say it. So we're going to leave it at that. That's also the last line of the movie, because we'll get to that in a second. It's a whole different thing to go into. And you have the big scene at the end with, well, there's also, Vivien Leigh also gets her other big scene where she remembers her husband killing himself. Apparently in the original play, but it was too racy to put in the actual movie at this particular time. His suicide came from being gay. And I guess she, like, said remarks to him about that caused his suicide. But the main movie, I think it's supposed to be restored in a version somewhere, but he just gets distraught and kills himself is the story we know. And then, of course, the ending is after Stanley has raped her, and nobody pretty much knows about that. They say that she's going to be, she's under the impression that she's going to, like, be going out with somebody, or going on a trip with somebody. Of course, this trip is to an institution. And that's when she says the line, I don't know you, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers, and then she's hauled off. The ending is, apparently Tennessee Williams is pissed about the ending. Obviously, Stella says, you hear Stanley calling for her, and she says, you know what, I'm never going in there again, and she goes upstairs, and we assume that she's leaving Stanley, and the movie ends. Apparently the play's ending is, she just goes back in and lets Stanley comfort her, and we're basically under the assumption that she's going to be under his hardened rule for the rest of her life. But they had to give it a Hollywood ending, so Stella, you know, obviously it's pretty risky for a Hollywood movie that's Blanche gets fucking taken off, but they had to at least have Stella say, I'm not going to take this shit anymore. So if only that was the real line. Yeah. So I'm sure there's an actress out there somewhere on stage that's improv'd and been fired. So
yes, in mid-scene, mind you.
So that is Streetcar in a nutshell. So it's rightfully earned its reputation as this big actor movie. Mm-hmm. There's not really much else to go on because the story is kind of paper thin, and the developments are kind of a little obvious. But just it's strictly one of those. It exists so the actors can do their thing. So, like I said, it's definitely worth a look just to watch the contrast of the new stuff Brando was doing and the old school stuff Vivien Leigh was doing, and it causing that contrast that really brings out stuff in the characters you wouldn't even. It'd be hard otherwise for an actor to pull out. So next we have On the Waterfront, which won a shitload. It won 8, and it was nominated for 12. Jesus.
Wow.
Okay. It got 3 supporting actor nominations.
Good Lord.
For Lee J. Cobb, Rod Steiger, and Karl Malden again.
And there were 5 nominees that year? Yeah. Good God.
And they all lost.
I'm not surprised, actually.
It got another nomination for score.
Okay.
It won Best Picture. Elia Kazan won Best Director. Brando won Best Actor. Eva Marie Saint won Best Supporting Actress, and it was her first movie.
Wow. And
it won Screenplay, Cinematography, Art Direction, and Editing.
Good God.
That's all for the black and white category, obviously. This movie is different. This movie is more of a crime movie. You have Terry, I think is his name. Yes. And he works for this gangster who is Lee J. Cobb. Johnny Friendly, I think is his name. And basically, there's this guy in the area, Joey. And Joey is a nice guy, apparently. We don't get to meet him very much, but it's told throughout the entire movie, Joey's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But apparently he pissed off the wrong people. So Terry, who's just an errand boy for Friendly, does this thing where he tells Joey, "Hey, I found your pigeon. It seems to have run away." The dialogue's much better than that. I'm just paraphrasing.
It's all right.
So Joey says, "All right, I'll meet you on the roof." Of course, Terry doesn't go to the roof because that's where Friendly's guys are waiting.
Yeah, of course.
Terry is under the impression that they're up there and they're gonna scare Joey into not talking.
Yeah.
And not ratting them out.
Intimidation, obviously.
So Terry's out minding his own business, just hanging out with some people, and we hear a scream and a thud. And Joey is fucking dead. So that is when we meet Joey's sister, who is Eva Marie Saint. And naturally, Terry falls in love with her, but she doesn't know that he works for Johnny Friendly. So, Eva Marie Saint goes after this priest, who is Carl Malden, who she's basically going to use to sort this out and try to get people to stop this, everything, and avenge Joey's death and all that, and stop it from happening. The crime from happening. Obviously, you can't stop Joey's death from happening now. And Rod Steiger is a major character who is, he's Terry's brother, and he's also Johnny Friendly's right-hand man and lawyer. So, a lot of conflicting things going on. A lot of conflicting loyalties, if you will. Now that I've given you the plot synopsis, it's worth noting that this movie was very personal, apparently. Because the director is known for being the guy that, ratted out a lot of people. And during that era of Hollywood. And everybody shunned him. Even when he got his honorary Oscar, there was people like Nick Nolte and Ed Harris. You got, shots of them just angrily looking at the stage and not clapping. So this basically making on the screenwriter too apparently was another one of them that ratted people out. So this was basically their way of trying to express where they were coming from. They were trying to say they were in Terry's position, where you don't want, because what happens is Terry's subpoenaed and he's brought on to testify against Johnny Friendly. But, his brother works for Johnny Friendly and there's all these threats coming and, he just doesn't know what to do. So he has no choice but to do the right thing because bad things are happening to otherwise decent people. Which is what makes Brando's performance so interesting, because he was known for this tough guy thing. This was after Streetcar and after The Wild One, where he was, the ultimate rebel. This is a performance where he's also kind of got the tough guy thing, because obviously he works for, their mob. But he's got that soft side to him that we didn't normally see from him back then. And we didn't really see too much from him afterwards. He kind of got into that tough guy thing before he got into the weird fat old guy thing. And it was just, there's these layers to his character that you just have to, you can't even really describe, you just have to watch the performance. He manages to do this whole, you could see, he's probably a guy that could work as an enforcer, but he's also got that soft side to him that wants to do the right thing, despite the fact that he works for the mob, more or less. Or whatever they are. Their little gang. And it's got obviously it's packed full of memorable scenes. Obviously, the scene with Rod Steiger, where Terry realizes where he is in his life, where he could possibly be killed for ratting out a gangster, and people he knows are dying, and testifying, all this shit. He was supposed to be a boxer that was going to go on to great fame, but the reason he didn't was because he had to throw a fight for Johnny Friendly, and that ruined his career. So, and that's where the big scene comes from. Like, I don't even want to say the quotes because it's fucking cheesy, but in context, they're just perfect where they are. That's why they're so famous.
Mm.
And the three supporting players are great because you kind of have you have Carl Malden, who's the voice of reason. You have Johnny Friendly, who's the villain, and you have Rod Steiger, who's kind of on both sides because he wants to be Terry's brother, but he's got to be Johnny Friendly's muscle, basically. And ends up getting himself killed for it, unfortunately. One of those famous scenes where they killed him and then they displayed him on a wall for Terry to find. These 50s movies don't get too much credit for how fucking hardcore they are for living in that censored era.
Yeah, it's true.
And I just... The other memorable scenes are the scenes where there's this heartbreaking scene where all of Terry's pigeons are killed.
Ooh.
by the kid that like admired him and really like was the role model for. There's the famous scene where he and Eva Marie saying where she won't let him in and he barges his way in and they end up doing that kiss, and that's a really famous scene. And of course the ending scene where he testifies against them. And all the dock workers on the waterfront feel betrayed, so they all beat the living shit out of him. And then he stands up after having the shit beat out of him and says, you know, he has no regrets about testifying. And so he wants to work like everybody else. And then the last shot of the movie is him walking with the other dock workers while Johnny Friendly threatens him. But we don't know where it goes from there because the movie just ends. So a lot of people consider it a perfect movie. I'd say it's pretty close, and especially with all this, the story has so many different things it's doing, and the way it all manages to cleanly pack it into less than 2 hours. It's like an hour 45. That's
wow.
it. The movie's impressive on a shitload of levels, and I think because of that, I prefer it to Streetcar. Like I said, it's pretty hard to say I choose one over the other because they're so different. Otherwise, story-wise, and the way they're executed, but I'd take on the Waterfront. So.
All right,
I think it's maybe I prefer his Streetcar performance.
Okay.
But as the movies themselves, I would pick on the Waterfront.
All right.
So yeah, there you go.
Well, that ends our second to last Oscar-themed verses. Join us tomorrow where we have quite a battle on our hands. And it will be interesting to see who comes out on top in the final Oscar-themed verses of 2014. So, any final parting words for this one?
I think that's it.